The ANC mourns the passing of Namibian freedom fighter and first democratically elected president Sam Nujoma. Nujoma, who played a key role in the leading of Southwest Africa People's Organization that ultimately saw the winning of the country's independence in 1990, passed away on Saturday, aged 95. For more on this and other issues, we are joined by the ANC's first Deputy Secretary General, Nomvula Mokonyane. Deputy Secretary, a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for talking to us here on the programme.
Morning, Leanne, and morning to the viewers. Thanks for inviting us.
A direct link between the former president of Namibia, Dr. Sam Nujoma, and of course South Africa. I mean, there's a very long legacy and history there. Perhaps you'd like to talk to us about the legacy he leaves behind.
Firstly, let me once again convey my sincere condolences and that of the ANC, and of course the people of South Africa, to the people of Namibia, SWAPO, and the family of Comrade President Sam Nujoma. This is an end of an era, a generation that fought for freedom and ushered freedom under a colonial rule and the dominance of the apartheid system. They fought tirelessly. Namibia was the last before South Africa attained its freedom. And together we worked to support Namibia in having a victorious outcome in their elections. We learned out of them. And one of the things that we'll forever remember Comrade Nujoma on is the unity of the oppressed, that a united people with a common vision can never actually be defeated. And even at this time, when South Africa and the world is focusing on our country to deal with a very critical matter, the issue of land, we draw inspiration from comrade leaders, veterans and stalwarts of the liberation struggle in Africa on how to manage and deal with the issues of inequality, redress within the confines of the law.
Yeah. I mean, the ANC, of course, enjoying very close ties with Namibian former liberation movement, SWAPO. What role did Nujoma play in South Africa's history of struggle and liberation? Because we do know, obviously, that he was the president once Namibia gained independence from South Africa that took the country forward and through all of that. But I think inspiring South Africa and certainly the likes of Mandela to continue to work as hard as possible as the ANC and movements to get the independence, the democratic rights of many in South Africa noticed.
Not only post-independence of Namibia and South Africa, he shared the trenches with Comrade President Oliver Tambo. He kept SWAPO united during the years of illegality of SWAPO, together with the African National Congress's leadership under President Oliver Tambo. They enjoyed international solidarity amongst progressive nations such as the people of Cuba, who under his leadership were able to accommodate young people of Namibia, train them, develop them, and prepare them for a democratic Namibia, just as it happened even with the youth of South Africa under the banner of the African National Congress. These are gallant fighters who did not only take arms, but they also prepared their countries, their freedom fighters, for a democratic dispensation. He gave the support to Comrade President Tambo on him interacting with the world, on the South Africa that we want, before we even went to the negotiations, up until that Comrade Tambo came with what is called the Harare Declaration. These were equals, these were brothers, and these were people who were very determined that the solution to the conflict, the solution to the dispossession can only be resolved through a negotiated settlement. And hence we continue to say, out of every conflict, having learned from a revolutionary such as President Nujoma, President Tambo, who ultimately had a stroke, having crisscrossed the world, pursuing the world to support the ANC's ideas of negotiations, have been able to usher in democracy, appreciate that there has to be reconciliation, and that a national emancipation program will not be completed until we deal with issues of land in a just and an equitable manner within the confines of the law.
Certainly one of the lessons South Africa can learn from Namibia, and you mentioned that, is through a just and legal manner, the whole land issue. Namibia was or has been, but I think it seems to be gaining traction now for its very slow process on the land redistribution. But through legality, through compensation, through what they call expropriation of land with compensation, there seems to be the solution coming. So that has been their manner. Let's talk to perhaps lessons learned through Namibia and they're moving forward on this issue, and South Africa, and lessons we can possibly learn.
One of the lessons that South Africa can learn is that a minority cannot bully a majority when it comes to issues of interest. The Expropriation of Land Act that has been passed is actually within the confines of the Constitution and the rule of law. It is only those who resist any intention of redress, an intention of emancipation of the disenfranchised, and unfortunately they've become the loudest, when in actual fact, ourselves in South Africa, we do emphasize the issues of compensation as well as expropriation for public use and for public good, to de-racialize our country, to integrate our country, to invest on future development, and most importantly, to do away with the past within the confines of the law, informed by the Constitution of the Republic that has got a very explicit, there's one clause in our Constitution that is very explicit, which is the property clause, which consciously was made to be this explicit because of the sensitivities that go with it, but without also delaying the cause for redress.
Let's talk about this, and as much as this interview, we have mentioned we're going to speak about a wide range of issues, and I mean the land issue is what's become centre of attention, particularly after this weekend and this executive order that has now been signed from the US to South Africa about the whole issue about the expropriation of land, and particularly white South African Afrikaners being given refugee status to move to America, the stance of AfriForum, the stance of these movements that have been talking to the US about this whole policy and how things are. Let's get a reaction. What was your thought when you saw this executive order that's been signed against South Africa, where funding has now completely stopped as well?
It was really disappointing. Disappointing in a sense that there are lines of communication between the two nations, the United States of America, as well as the Republic of South Africa. That those lines of communication are also supported by a binational agreement that exists between South Africa and the United States of America. It was also disappointing that for a country that claims to understand the rule of law and engagements based on rules would just, without even consulting the South African government, without even verifying with our ambassador who's based in Washington, D.C., without interacting with the various working groups that exist between South Africa and the United States of America, there can then be that regulation that was actually announced. But we do, again, in memory of President Tambo, an internationalist, in honor of President Sam Nujoma, are still ready to interact and engage without actually undermining ourselves as a sovereign state, as a nation with its own constitution, to influence and make the United States of America's government to appreciate the risk they are actually putting themselves under for future relations. Also the disappointment that we have that whilst they can be able to communicate, they opt to interact with a tiny minority, and a minority within a minority of whites in our country that we have all embraced as part of South Africa, because all of us are South Africans, that we now have what has now become an issue globally.
Yeah.
We do believe that the matter can still be considered, but finally, South Africa must refuse to be bullied. South Africa must not be tempted to use and embrace what racists and reactionary forces want to influence. And in this instance, I think AfriForum can never be associated with formations that seek to have a prosperous, united, and a democratic South Africa.
And certainly going forward, because the repercussions of this are massive, because we know that this is a very big year, and certainly with AGOA and the renewal of AGOA, I mean, this is very beneficial to South Africa. I mean, we've mentioned the issue of USAID and the amount of money sitting at around $440 million that America does help and assist the most vulnerable in South Africa by moving into this country. I mean, with seeing that stopping, with a threat now to AGOA, with other trade issues. I mean, I know that there were one of the articles, I think it's on the front page of the Star, saying that a very high-powered delegation are going to request meetings and go to the US to smooth this issue over. Are you able to confirm that? Is that something that is going to happen? Have you been in touch with the US government since these utterances have been made and this executive order signed?
Our government in South Africa has confirmed that. I'm sure you have also heard the president during SONA, and we as the ANC support that, as I've said, in honor and memory of President Tambo, President Sam Nujoma. The issue of dialogue, engagement, and persuasion remains the best means of finding one another and resolving disputes and misunderstanding. Yes, we will continue, even at the level of the political party, the African National Congress. Work is happening on the ground, interacting with organizations and formations, including public representatives of the people of the United States of America, as well as other civil society influencers in the US. We will not just submit because we refuse to have the AfriForum laying claim of representing the people of South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, huge accusations from AfriForum. Basically, I mean, talking on their platform during the press conference on Saturday, placing the blame on President Cyril Ramaphosa and other senior ANC leaders for the US president's decision to cut off funds to South Africa. I mean, what was your reaction to this? I mean, I think it's a good opportunity.
That's very silly of them. That's very silly of them. You and me sitting here, we know how laws in this country are actually developed. The ANC doesn't impose policies or laws of this country. There are parliamentary processes, inclusive processes of consultation, and finally the enactment of a law through President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the president of the ANC. And yes, of course, because they lose influence in terms of perpetuating self-preservation, racial protection, and them becoming the supreme of the majority of the people of South Africa. That is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But the ANC is able to speak for itself and explain, because we are not a one-party state. We believe in multi-party democracy, and all these laws are products of multi-party and people-driven processes of the country, except these races.
Deputy Secretary General, are you prepared to meet with AfriForum to talk to them? I mean, is that something you're interested in? Because they say they're willing to hold honest discussions with both parties about the state of the country. Will you meet with them? Will you talk to them? Do you feel you need to owe them an explanation for anything?
Firstly, we don't support the idea of them saying they are available to meet with President Cyril Ramaphosa, because they are not an alternative government. But for the ANC, we are pretty ready to talk to anyone in our country so that we can also help them. They need to be saved from themselves. Old as they are, having been South Africans who still continue to benefit from the history of apartheid in terms of land ownership, economic opportunities, access to communication. We do need to talk to them. They need to be saved from themselves. But if they want to go, they can go. If they want to be disassociated with the democratic processes, including the consultation processes, where they also participate in NEDLAC, where they've also been part of our discussions around the Bella Act, they can actually beg and go and leave us in peace because they believe that they do not belong here. But definitely, they are not the alternative representatives of the people of South Africa, including the majority of white Afrikaners. I've even said in one of the interviews, they can go and leave our Africans here because that is not what they can actually use. It's an indigenous language of South Africa. And secondly, they can go wherever they want to go because they are known not to be patriots.
Okay. Is that your message to the Afrikaans community, the white Afrikaans community, perhaps that do feel marginalized? Is that your message?
No.
If you want to go, or
not
are you...
to the white Afrikaans community.
May I ask you
AfriForum.
To AfriForum. May I ask you?
AfriForum.
I think it's an important message.
You are interviewing me. I mean, Kruas of North Devon, surrounded by Afrikaners as my neighbors.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
beauty of them, they refuse to be associated with AfriForum. They believe that they belong. This is their country.
Yeah.
They are actually embarrassed that some people assume that AfriForum represents them.
Yeah.
They believe they are represented through the Freedom Front Plus. Here in our municipality, they believe that they are represented by Freedom Front Plus and many other parties, the DA and Almal Fanele in the National Assembly. They refuse to be labeled as those represented by the Freedom Front, by
AfriForum.
by AfriForum.
Okay.
And lastly, that's why as the ANC, we support that there be a national dialogue.
Okay.
So that we deal with the stubborn remnants of racism and separate development.
I think it was an important fact to make and a point to make at the end of this interview, and I thank you. We thank you for your time. Nomvula Mokonyane, the ANC's first Deputy Secretary General, speaking about these political developments in the country and, of course, the meaning that the former president and the late president now of Namibia, Sam Nujoma, had with South Africa and his legacy.